The matchup between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Dallas Cowboys just got a whole lot more interesting. We'll dive into it next.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to this crossover edition of the Locked On Chiefs and Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are now the #1 sports podcast network, and today's episode is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher from Locked On Cowboys. That is Ryan Tracy from Locked On Chiefs. And we are going to break down this Thanksgiving Day matchup between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Dallas Cowboys in the mid-afternoon. And let's start with some of the biggest storylines, because there was a point, Ryan, last week when the Chiefs were down 20-9 and the Cowboys were facing this big game against the Eagles, where I honestly wondered, was this game going to matter for either the Cowboys or the Chiefs? Not the case. Huge game for both of these teams.
I was absolutely with you. I shaking my head, pulling my hair out. There's not much left, but that's all right. And now we get to flip all the scripts. And I think that's kind of been the tail of the tape for this whole season is starting one direction for both of these teams, starting to turn it around, getting to the point where epic win for your team last week. I mean, a must win for my team at this point. And now they're all like, oh, wait a minute, maybe we can make a run. Maybe we can rise above what we've been putting out on the field to this point. I'm pretty excited about it, but it feels like it's just more of the same to me. Chiefs have to have this game. It seems like the Cowboys probably do too.
Yeah, and the Cowboys' chances to make the playoffs it's a lot harder in the NFC. You look at the wild card teams, all those teams have 8 wins. The Philadelphia Eagles already have 8 wins. So it's going to take like an epic collapse from other teams for the Cowboys to get in. But when you look at this Cowboys schedule, you were seeing the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Lions 3 games in a row. But if you win this game and you beat Philadelphia last week, who was the Super Bowl champion, you beat Kansas City this week, who made it to the Super Bowl last year, suddenly you look at your schedule and there's not a team on there that you can't beat. And while the Cowboys playoff odds are pretty low at 5-5-1, us Cowboy fans just want to see them playing better football and being able to play some of these top teams in the conference. And again, if you beat the Chiefs on Thanksgiving Day, you're trending in the right direction. And I think for Cowboy fans, with how bad this season has gone, doing that is pretty impressive.
Yeah, and it's going to be that much more terror-filled for me, given the situation. Having Quinnen Williams in town for the Cowboys, having Trey Smith not on the field for the Chiefs is a combination that I am not looking forward to on my Turkey Day. Thank you very much. I wanted a nice, calm, no overtime, no complication type day. And I just feel like this is coming down now, especially when these portions of the team are on the field against each other, that this is going to be a knockdown, drag out, and it's going to be back and forth for this Chiefs offense to even try to get going.
We're going to talk about some matchups to watch, and I can guarantee you that matchup between the Chiefs' interior offensive line and the Cowboys' defensive line will be one of them. But I had a couple questions for you about this Chiefs team. So they're just coming off a very physical game against the Indianapolis Colts, where the offense played, if I'm not mistaken, like 90-something snaps. It was a ridiculous amount. Now you're having to go on the road on a short week to play in Dallas. Whereas the Cowboys, they're one of the youngest teams in the NFL. They're a little bit beat up as well, but they're very young. This Chiefs team, we know it's old. They've played basically, a season worth of playoff games over the last 5 or 6 years. Yeah. Is there any concern about what the Chiefs might look like on a short week?
There's always some of that, particularly when last week was so out of character, where Andy Reid handed a single back 30 carries. We don't see that in Kansas City. We haven't seen that in the entire regime that Andy's been in town. So it was quite a departure. And I do think
was it like Larry Johnson the last time that we've seen a running back get that many carries?
Absolutely. It was pre-Priest, if I remember correctly. So that is a long time out. But you also have that concern that is part of one game plan, and this team has become more Jekyll and Hyde over the last couple of years. The consistency there between game plan to game plan is very much shifting. They're starting to find how this 53 has to play. And that run game is part of it. Now you have Kareem with it. I think right now he's still in the cold tub. So he's going to be there for quite a long time. Probably get Isaiah Pacheco back, which is going to be a good short-term answer. You never know with Isaiah Pacheco with the injury list there. Rashard Smith, a guy that's got a little bit more juice coming out of the backfield, but they've been reluctant to give him carries inside. So it's going to be a committee of committees at this point to try to avoid that letdown on what is a tight week and what is, I think, a bigger obstacle in Dallas than we thought they were a few weeks ago.
Well, the reason why is because they literally have a bigger obstacle in the middle of their defense in Quinnen Williams, and it's just been night and day having a superstar like this. And the Chiefs, they know exactly what this is like, having Chris Jones in the middle of your defense. You can build everything around that type of player. You can stop the run. You can get into these obvious passing situations where you can be more aggressive blitzing. That's what Quinnen Williams has brought to the Cowboys, where Philadelphia, their final 8 drives of the game, they had 103 yards. They averaged like 13 yards per drive. They never crossed the Cowboys' 40-yard line in any of their 8 drives. And it's because the defensive line was so dominant. And the Cowboys have stumbled into something where their best 3 defensive players are all defensive tackles. So what they've been doing is just figuring out ways to get all 3 of them on the field at the same time. They used a lot of 5 defensive lineman looks, help stop the run on early downs. And some of these teams that have offensive line injuries like Philadelphia, they just didn't know how to counter it and how to block it up because you end up getting one-on-one matchups. I think for the Cowboys, they eventually teams are going to figure it out to a degree, but there's only so much that you can do to block guys like Quinnen Williams and Kenny Clark and Oso Odigizua. We'll see how long it lasts, but the Cowboys are very excited about the direction of their defense.
And I would be too, especially given the season culmination here, going from what is an outside rush pass heavy to the interior having to stir the drink at this point. I personally would like to see the Chiefs use a lot of jumbo, try to get some double bodies on there, run duo all over them and tire them out. But the problem is Trey Smith and his back and his ankle and a couple of other things are not ready to go at this point. So there will be a backup in there. It is most likely Mike Caliendo. That's not confirmed at this point, but that is a 90th percentile chance. And that's problematic if you want to try to run that direction. You could probably get by with some quick pass game. You can probably do a couple of other things, but this is going to be a find where Q is and attack him with as much of the offensive line as you can and hope you survive the rest.
We should mention Kingsley Suamatia playing left guard. That's a guy that the Cowboys really liked pre-draft as a tackle. Now he's moved into guard. He's had a nice season, but privately, the Cowboys think that they can attack both guards in this matchup. It should be a lot of fun. One more storyline I just wanted to throw at you from the Cowboys side of things, and that's the development of George Pickens. Now, he's going to be questionable going into this game with knee and calf injuries. I think he's going to play. They absolutely need him, but he's been a superstar. He already has 4 games this season, Ryan, of at least 130 receiving yards and a touchdown. I think he's done that like 2 other times in his NFL career. I mean, he has been dominant, so much so that Cowboy fans have been like arguing with themselves who's the best receiver on this team. And CeeDee Lamb was like widely viewed as a top 5 receiver in the NFL, right? So it's just, can Pickens take over this matchup? Trent McDuffie doesn't have the size to match up with him on the outside. Do we see like Jalen Watson playing up against them? I don't know. But frankly, right now, we haven't seen anybody cover George Pickens. I'm curious to see if that continues to play out on Thursday.
And, I am really interested to see how it works as well, because I think you're going to see waves. It will start with Jalen Watson, absolutely, because I think the physicality has to be there. I think George, from what we know of him, I don't know how he's feeling in Dallas, but previously, he's a guy you can get under his skin. You can take him out of his game, and I think that is exactly what Jalen Watson does very well. They're going to run Noah Williams at him. They might even give him a couple looks of Christian Fulton, although I'm going to hold my breath while they do. But it will be a committee on that side of the corner as well. And I do think you're going to see Trent McDuffie move around the formation a little bit. The question will be, what do they do out of the slot and how do they choose to attack that?
Should be a really fun matchup. Let's talk about some other matchups that we are excited to see on Thursday afternoon, including Tyler Booker versus Chris Jones. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's not a better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game, or if you just want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who's going to score the next bucket to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late game push. The basketball has been fantastic to start the year. I mean, I've just been hooked, partially because my Lakers are looking really good right now, but every single night just delivers awesome matchups and games. So right now, go over to FanDuel. They've got an incredible offer. They're giving away $300 in bonus bets to new customers when you bet $5. All your bet has to do is win, and you'll get $300 in bonus bets. So head over to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to this crossover edition of the Locked On Chiefs and Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us the #1 sports podcast network. Ryan, let's talk about some matchups, because this game is littered with interesting matchups on both sides of the ball. But what's one of the ones that you're going to be paying the most attention to?
Well, for me, it always starts with the defensive side, what you can do to kind of get somebody out of their game. And my take will start with a question of you. Is it Nate Thomas that I need to go watch? Is who we're going to see at right tackle?
Yeah, so it's Tyler Guyton's going to be out with a high ankle injury. Nate Thomas has started several games for the Cowboys this year and actually has played pretty well, but that's who's going to be at left tackle, yes.
That's the premier matchup. George Karlaftis is a guy that can get, with the right matchup, on a streak. It's getting that engine started that has been the challenge at this point. A lot of attention goes to Chris Jones, as it always should, but it's about making the most of double teams elsewhere. So if Chris is getting that attention, you have to make him pay. A backup in at the right tackle spot, just like on the Chiefs line, you have to expect to attack that. And I don't think it's just with George Karlaftis. You're going to see some blitzing. You're going to see some five-man rushes that aren't necessarily bringing DBs like Spags likes to do, but it is all mostly going to be designed to allow George to get into a rhythm, to get him to be that true second pass rusher that they need. That's job #1 on the defensive side for me.
Can't wait to watch it. Nate Thomas has had a very good season as a backup. I do wonder if he's one of these players that the more he plays, the more he gets exposed. But last week he came in against Philadelphia, and in that second half of the game, the Cowboys were basically in a must-pass situation the entire time. He held up incredibly well. Now, I don't think he offers quite as much as a run blocker as what Tyler Guyton does, but anytime that you can put a backup in there, and they never really have anybody lined up chipping or protecting him, it's certainly one to watch. I'm looking at this Tyler Booker, the Cowboys rookie right guard, versus Chris Jones. We can also throw in Cooper Beebe and Tyler Smith because they're all going to be blocking Chris Jones. But one of the reasons, Ryan, the Cowboys drafted Tyler Booker at pick number 12, a guard at 12 is really high. I mean, it's whatever. Yeah. The positional value is not great. But they thought they needed to be more physical, and they needed to add an edge to their offensive line. They have a bunch of really good players, but there is a lack of physicality in that group. Not with Tyler Booker. They went and drafted him because of games against like Dexter Lawrence in their division, Jalen Carter in the division. And now you're playing, in my mind, the premier defensive tackle in the league in Chris Jones. I don't expect Booker to win every matchup, but if he can win his fair share of matchups, I think the Cowboys should be able to control this pass rush.
It'll be really interesting to see if that's the way that it works out. I have not done a ton of film on him as a professional, but spent a lot of time with that tape when he was coming out in the draft. And one of the issues for me was hand placement and hand ability to staunch a pass rush. And that's Chris Jones's bread and butter. He's going to have fast hands all day long. I'm not certain that he's going to be able to get his hands on Jones enough to slow him down. So what he's going to have to do is either have help or guide him away from the path of least resistance to allow that run game to take over, because that's what I'm concerned about is the Javonte Williams effect. We've seen it in Denver. We're familiar with the back. But what it does for this offense, as I've tried to scout them here, is set up not only your outside guys that obviously are going to draw attention. You're probably going to have at least a bracket, if not a match kind of zone that's going to take both of them way over the top. So it comes down to what's the next matchup, and it's running and then the play action of Ferguson, because the Chiefs have struggled against tight ends. The fact that Warren did not go off on them last week from the Indianapolis Colts was a miracle. I don't think they have 2 in a row. So my expectation is that tight end matchup against the Chiefs safeties is going to be one that we're going to come back to as this game unfolds.
Another matchup that I wanted to mention, this is mostly because I love this guy pre-draft and I wanted to talk about him, is Brashad Smith, the former wide receiver that moved to running back. I was kind of hoping the Cowboys drafted him. Instead, they took Jaden Blue, who's been a healthy scratch for like the last 2 months. But the Cowboys gave up a ton of receptions in the flats last week to Saquon Barkley. They could not cover running backs leaking out to the sideline. And that's where Brashad Smith, if you watch any of these games with the Chiefs, that's where he does most of his action. And with the Cowboys, again, using more of these 5-man defensive lines, they can get exposed with guys leaking out to the backfield. If the Chiefs were wise in this game, I think this would be a heavy Kareem Hunt and Brashad Smith game. Use Hunt on short yardage, use Smith on passing downs, because that is an area the Cowboys have struggled.
And that makes perfect sense to me. That's what I'd like to be able to see them do. I just don't know after that last game on 3 days rest, Kareem Hunt's going to be able to carry that load. They've been a little reluctant to let Smith run in between the tackles. So it's going to be about whether Isaiah Pacheco is able to actually contribute. He was practicing last week. They held him out. So I think that was in preparation for this matchup. Mm-hmm. But I agree. The flats and honestly the arrow routes that Smith can take and get behind a linebacker to the point where he's got some daylight to run through, that's going to be one of the matchups that I'm trying to either get the mismatch that I want or create it through motion and moving the rest of that defensive secondary around.
One more matchup, at least on my end, and please interrupt me if you want. Rashee Rice against the Cowboys defensive backs. The Cowboys have played a ton of zone. Patrick Mahomes is the #1 quarterback in the league on zones in terms of EPA. They don't have a player that can match up with Rice one-on-one. So I would assume it's going to be a lot of zones. If you can take away Rice, you can shut down this offense. I'm not sure how Dallas is going to do that outside of just creating a ton of quick pressure.
And that's what it's going to have to be. They have to work together because Patrick's been actually as good as I've ever seen him against zone this particular season. And with Rice, with everything that you just said, that's exactly what they're planning, is they want that attention on Rice. Try to take him away. Try to come down out of those matchup zones, especially if you're playing 2 or 3 high, because they have 2 guys in Xavier Worthy and Tyquan Thornton. They're going to stretch the hell out of that field, and they're going to come after you with it. They've had some success doing that. Tyquan Thornton is not a guy that gets a whole lot of targets. He makes a whole lot of yards, though, and they are shot takers this season more than any other in the last 3 because they have that stretchability. So they are hoping that Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice draw all that coverage down to them. So if the opposite goes and you get an Amarillo type defense, we're trying to drop 8 and get all those deep coverages, it's going to be either back to that run or back to those quick hitters. The horizontal drags will be an option here for this offense.
Should be a really fun cat and mouse game on Thursday afternoon. I can't wait to see it. Matt Eberflus, the Cowboys defensive coordinator, got a lot of criticism early in the year, deservedly so. And now this defense is starting to round into shape. We'll see what they do against Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. Let's talk about some keys to victory. What do the Cowboys and the Chiefs need to get done on Thursday in order to get a win? We'll get to that next. Welcome back to this crossover edition of the Locked On Chiefs and Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast. 2 shows every single day, 1 in the morning with Tyler Rowland, 1 in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Ryan, let's talk about some keys to victory. What do the Chiefs need to do in order to win this game? Because if Kansas City does win this game and you get to, they would be 7-5 at that point, or 8-5.
It would be 7. I'm sorry to say.
7-5 though, at least puts you back into the AFC wildcard picture. You hope Jacksonville slips up. Maybe Buffalo loses to the Steelers this week. It gets you back into the hunt. What do they need to do that?
It's multiple things, but the emphasis really has to be on the offense. They found a spark of what they used to be able to do. It's going to look a little bit different, but they have to sustain that. The defense has been able to rise to the occasion. While this is one of the biggest obstacles in their way, you have to feel like they're going to at least keep you in the ballgame. The offense has not always done that this season. So what they have to have is balance, and this offense has to be able to put up points to try to keep up with all of the offensive weapons that we just talked about on the Cowboys side of the ball. That's the hard part. For me, it comes down to two things. You have to eliminate your mistakes. The penalties have been ferocious lately in just degrading their ability to be efficient with the ball, and you cannot turn over the ball. Patrick Mahomes, in particular, has been a little bit sloppy with some of the things that he's been doing. He's been over-scouted and playing into trends that he now has to break. If he can do that, I think they have a chance.
And on the same side, I mean, Dallas last week, you want to talk about penalties, turnovers. In the first 20 minutes of the game, I got a list. I'll read you some of the list here. Listen, this is the first 20 minutes of the game. They had a 4th down drop. They had a 3 and out. They had a roughing the punter. They had an offsides on a 3rd down, which they got off the field. They had a CeeDee Lamb drop. They had a CeeDee Lamb fumble. They had a Kevontae Turpin fumble. They had a 3rd and 12 where they lined off offsides. They had a false start. They had a tripping call. They had another false start, and they had a Dak red zone interception. First 20 minutes of the game. That's how you get down 21-0 against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, they were able to come back in that game because they made some ridiculous plays in the second half. But the Eagles are so much better coached. Or sorry, the Chiefs are so much better coached than the Eagles are. Like if they get a big lead on you, they're not going to let you come back. They're suffocating. The defense is really, really good. For the Cowboys, it's all about game script. If you can start this game off with a lead, whether it's 10-3, 13-7, something where you can't just let the Chiefs tee off on Dak Prescott, and you extend this game out, that is how you win as a home underdog against the Super Bowl contending Kansas City Chiefs. Again, that is much easier said than done for a Cowboys team that loves to make mental mistakes, but that's what you have to do.
Well, I hope that trend continues. No offense. Maybe we'll see. At least your guys can line up actually at the line of scrimmage. We're not sure all the tackles on this team can do that. Well, so sometimes we get ourselves a little bit behind. But I will say this. The fact that comeback was significant. The fact that the Chiefs had to come back as well. I do feel like both of these teams are kind of on the rise. And so it's about limiting those mistakes and being able to hone in on what is a short week, on what that weakness actually is. I expect the first 15 from Andy Reid to be very exploratory, to see where he thinks he has that edge. And once he gets there, the question becomes, will Andy actually lead on it? Or will he just get distracted with something shiny and doing something super cool and new? That will be the question. This feels to me like it has to be a very workmanlike game, and you have to have a plan about what you do once you get punched in the face. This team has been beaten multiple times this year because they were not able to respond to a physical blow early in the first quarter, and I expect that's what the Cowboys want to come out and do right off the bat.
Yeah, and for Dallas, it's all about scoring touchdowns and not kicking field goals. Last week, they were atrocious in the red zone. I mean, they were awful. CeeDee Lamb had a drop in the end zone. Dak had an interception in the end zone. 2 different times the Cowboys were within 5 yards and did not score a single point. I know Steve Spagnuolo's defense is really good. They're fundamentally sound. They're technically sound. You still have to punch it in when you get down there, because one of the things, if you haven't watched a lot of Chiefs games this year, there's just so many limited possessions in these games. They play this like really slow brand of football where you might only get 3 possessions a half. You've got to maximize those possessions. You're not going to win this game by kicking field goals. You might only get into the red zone 3 times all game. You've got to score touchdowns on all 3 of them.
That makes a whole lot of sense, and I would echo that right back at you as well, because there have been too many times where a penalty takes them out of field goal range, or a penalty takes them out of the red zone, where the offense becomes more challenged. I would say the other key to this victory is displaying what we saw last week in a little bit of an ability to play outside of your norm. And that goes for both sides of the ball, both coordinators, and Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo. They've shown a little bit of reluctance to really get into some of the advanced game scripts. I expect the Cowboys to do things that get them rattled, and the question will be, how do they respond? This is not as much this season an execution issue in my mind as it is a planning and coordination issue. And that is not to let the players off the hook, but is also to understand that the communication between the coaches and the players is not what it has been in past seasons. They have to be able to roll with the punches and act as a unit. I think that's also a key for them to be on the right page.
There's not really a must-win game in, middle of November, but this is pretty close. Like for the Cowboys, if you go 5-6-1, you're not winning the division. You're not making the wild card. Essentially, your season is over unless you go on a fantastic run and a bunch of teams lose games. And the same is true for Kansas City. Like with Kansas City not having tiebreakers against Buffalo and Jacksonville and the Chargers right now, you can't really afford to be 6-6 with their upcoming schedule. You kind of have to win, and that's going to make this game really exciting, really tense. It's got a big game atmosphere, and it just so happens to be on Thanksgiving where everybody's going to be watching.
Well, the Cowboys have the advantage there. I don't think Patrick Mahomes has ever played a Thanksgiving game, and he kind of stirs the drink for this. So I hope that everybody in Dallas has a good holiday, as you do as well. Just not the most holiday, maybe.
I will say that you're eating that pumpkin pie or that apple pie after a Thanksgiving win. Nothing tastes better. So I'm hoping that Cowboy fans get to have that. I'm sure you are as well with the Chiefs. Tell the people where they can find all of your great work.
There is a ton of it. It all starts on X at Ryan Tracy NFL. You can find me at NFL33.com, where we run down the league and the draft, as well as Rogue Analytics. Appreciate that time, Marcus. It's good to talk to you.
Of course, make sure you guys go follow his co-host, Chris Clark at Chris Clark NFL. You can follow Landon McCool at McCoolBCB, who is my co-host on the Locked On Cowboys podcast. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Enjoy this awesome Thanksgiving slate of games, and we'll see you guys all right back here on Friday.